Hey everyone, this is Ace Take Glass, and today I'll be teaching you how to make a kinetic spinner pendant. So right now, I'm just heating up a piece of glass that was on my bench because I'm going to use it to shape the bottom of the pendant that I'm making. And right now, you can actually skip toward the end of the video if you don't want to learn how to sculpt a recycler, because that just happens to be the type of pendant that I'm making right now. You can make anything spin, honestly, and most of this video is just to show how to sculpt the recycler, and the very end of it is where it shows how to really make the seals that allow the glass to spin. So if you don't really want to see how to make the recycler, you can go ahead and skip forward. But if so, then right now what I'm doing is I'm just heating up the loop that I had and that I begun melting, and I'm just trying to swirl it up with another color, and then I'm going to use that to be the base of the recycler. That'll be the first thing that I end up shaping. So right now I'm just going back and forth, heating it nice and evenly, making sure that it is all nice and evenly glowing all the way around. And that's what you're looking for when you are in the flame, and you want the glass, when it's molten, to manipulate evenly, is for an even glow all the way around. So looks like I swirled the color up. Right now I'm about to get into the shaping of it. So I'm heating it up with a larger flame to allow for a more surface area. And then I'm going to roll it in the marver here in a second, and then use my paddle to tool it to make it more of a cone shape, because the flame only makes it round, so I want to make it have that nice angular shape, like how a base of a nice rig would have. So I'm just heating it up, I'm rolling it in the marver here, and I'm gently tapping the end of it to accentuate that cone shape there. I think that's green stardust mixed with some cooler glass, if I'm not mistaken. So I'm just going in on the bottom part and finalizing that shape to make it more accentuated. Now I believe I'm going to be picking a color to make the bottom axis with. So this will be the part that actually is responsible for the spin. This is just pretty much a really short little peg, and you want it to be at the very center of your axis, and it just comes to a real just basic point, and I try to keep mine anywhere between a ½ inch to an inch long. I don't want it to be that long, and you just pull it to a nice simple point, and what that'll do is it'll sit in the divot that you create, that I'll actually show later in the video, and it sits in this divot and spins perfectly without falling out. So I got that sealed on, and now what I'm doing is I cut off the handle on the other side so I could shape the top of the base. So now I'm going and heating it up, using my marver to shape the top of it so it's more of an hourglass shape instead of a kind of a round shape. Making sure it's nice and even on both ends, heating it up and going around. And after this, I just make sure that there's no stress in there, and move on to the next step. So I believe what I'm doing here is I'll be shaping the drain portion, or the funnel, and I'm going to connect this up with I think this is some cooler glass and Loch Ness. They look really good together. So just making sure that they're all sealed in. And when you do a seal like that, when you seal two rods together, you really want to make sure that it's finalized all the way and that there's no stress, because depending on how much weight you have at the end of the rod, it could always break in your hand, and you don't want that to happen. So right there, I just pulled off a little bit of extra bubble trash that I saw at the end of that color. Now I'm heating it up the same way, nice and evenly. I'm getting the whole body nice and hot, because I want this to also be slightly of a cone shape, because how a nice funnel in a recycler always has that really nice cone shape. That's what I'm going for right here. So heating it up again, and then using the paddle, the same technique that I did before. And when I roll it in the marver, it's kind of hard to see at this angle, but I'm rolling it at about a 45-degree angle so that it creates, so when it spins, it's creating the shape itself. If you can imagine it, it just the walls kind of force themselves into place when you roll it at that angle. And then when you use the paddle, it just really pushes that cone shape in and flattens it out. So right now I'm doing the same thing as what I did with the bottom, or the first portion. I'm creating the top axis now, and just heating it up and gently stretching it so it comes to a nice simple point. And since this design is going to be a rig, this top portion acts somewhat of an imitation to the mouthpiece. So I always want to make sure that it's sealed on really clean. I mean, you always want to make sure everything's sealed clean, but that's besides the point. So right now what I'm doing is I'm shaping the drain. The funnel's been shaped, and now I'm going in on the drain to make sure that it's nice and proportional to the size of the funnel and the base. So I'm just going in, making sure that it's stretched out, not too thin, because that would make it look a little bit strange, and I definitely don't want it to be too thick. It's all about the correct portions. So now I'm gonna heat up the part right underneath the drain, and I'm gonna bend it. As you can see, kind of bends at a little 90-degree angle on its own there. And now I'm gonna heat it up some more and curve it back around, so that way it looks like it's sealing to the base of the recycler, so it completes the cycle. So right now you can see me estimating it to make sure that it will fit and remain on axis. That's the most important part of these. If you're sculpting a recycler or any major kinetic vessel or sculpture, you want to make sure that the weight distribution is even on all sides, because that's going to allow it to spin the easiest. If it's more weighted on one side than the other, then when you spin it, it's going to kind of wobble a little bit, and it won't spin as long as it would if it was evenly distributed. So right now, what's going on is I'm going to connect the top funnel to the bottom base. And I did that by heating up the bottom of the drain and the side of the base. And now, as you can see, I'm rotating it to make sure that it's on axis with both handles, so when it spins and none of it wobbles, and it looks nice and even. So right now I'm just cutting off the top part, and as you can see, it comes to a nice pointed tip there. And you don't want it to have a very big ball at the end of that tip. You want it to come to a pretty nice sharp point. Not too sharp, but just enough so it's a good tip where it can spin nice and easy. So after that, I'm going to go ahead and throw on the next uptake. And I want to put the uptake on first, because this particular design will have 2 uptakes and 2 drains. And if I were to attempt to put on the second drain first, if I heated it up in the area underneath the funnel, it could flop all over the place. So I'm using an uptake to sort of bridge it, as well as progress on the completion of the piece. So I'm just estimating exactly where it needs to be here. It's taking a little bit of time, but it's hard because when the stuff gets really, really small, it's all about absolute precision. Otherwise you can mess up and seal the glass where you don't want it. So right now I'm just going in and making the first uptake. That's what this is right here. And I sealed it on, and then I heated up the part of the rod that was thicker instead of the part that I just sealed, so that way I could stretch it out and make the uptake look proportionate, because right now it looks about the same width and diameter as the drain does, because I had to stretch it out. If I had just used the same size rod, then it would have just been way too big. So remember, everything's all about proportion when it comes to sculpture, and honestly a lot of glass blowing. It's mostly all comes down to very fine portions. But right now what I'm doing is going ahead and melting in the top seal, and I'm using this mini torch here because it allows me, greater artistic opportunity than the larger torch can offer, because I can only achieve certain angles from the large torch, where I can really get in and melt down any angle with the mini torch. So it's a very helpful tool to have. So right now, after that seal is finalized and melted in, you're going to go ahead and seal the second drain. And so that's what I'm doing right now. I'm finding the exact spot on the drain where I want to attach it, and I went ahead and stuck it on there. So now what I'm going to do is heat up the thick part of the rod and then begin to bend it so it slightly bends down toward the base, so it looks like it's returning the recycling function. And I'm making sure to heat up the thick rod instead of the rod that's already been stretched out, so I keep everything the same size. And it's very important to make sure to go back over your seals like I did with the uptake, to make sure that they're all melted in completely, and to not prevent any cracks later on. And this is just important to do on any aspect of glass blowing, whether it's sculptural or hollow work. You definitely want to have clean seals with even walls on the inside and outside. So right now, as you can see, I had just attached the second drain, and now I'm heating it up and bending it. After I had cut it off, I'm bending it to the bottom of the base so it can, like I said, complete that function. And right now I'm pulling off some extra glass because it was a little bit too long and I needed it to be just the right portion. So as you can see, I'm finishing that bend right up there, nice and easy. You just heat up back and forth over a couple centimeters of the rod to create those bends, and then you just grab it with your tweezers and it just kind of bends with it, nice and easy. So now I'm doing the exact same thing as with the uptake. I'm sealing on the second drain and making sure that that's one solid piece of fluent glass with the bottom. So the top portion and the bottom portion are now thoroughly connected and it's completely fluid. And you just don't want to have any acute angles or any very sharp angles in the glass. You want it all to flow very smoothly from one section to the next, because those acute angles will be the cause of the cracks. That's where cracks like to develop, is in those very sharp angles. It's hard for cracks to form over a smoother surface. So I'm just going in and heating that up. As you can see, it's in the axis where the two drains meet. They're nice and melted together in as well. And it's easy to do that because when you attach one part of the drain or one part of the uptakes, it's holding itself in place. So you can go in and melt the top part of the uptake, and then the bottom part will be holding it in place. And then if the bottom part needs some more work, you can go ahead and do that, and the top part will be holding it in place. So it's kind of a symbiotic relationship there. It helps. So now what I'm doing is I'm putting the second uptake on, and I believe that this one is the hardest one to do in this entire piece, because I'm sealing this uptake in between two drains, which are really close together. And here actually I had tagged one of the drains, which means that I'd accidentally touched it with the molten glass when I didn't want to. So what I did is I kept it out of the flame and gently pulled it apart, and I was able to, readjust it and make sure that it didn't touch it. So I'm going in and heating up the larger rod again and making sure that it's proportionate. I'm creating the bend for the second uptake. And the part where I just sealed the second uptake isn't completely melted in yet, because it was really hard to do, and so I didn't want to make everything too molten and move around and get it all messed up. So I just sealed it really quickly and then continued to shape it. So what I'm going to do now that I've got it sealed on is go exactly back, and you guessed it, finish those seals and make sure they're all melted in. So I'm just doing that with the reamer here. I just use that little graphite tool, the little pencil tool, to go ahead and push the glass where I want it to go. It kind of helps make it get done a little bit quicker. And now I'm going to make sure that the part where it's sealed to the base is finalized as well. Right now I use this bushy flame to heat it all up nice and slowly and evenly, so it's all evenly heated and I can continue to work without putting it in the kiln. That's called an annealing flame. And right now I'm going ahead and I believe I'm choosing the glass that I'm going to use to make the joint. And luckily with these sculptural pieces you don't have to put in a diffuser, so that helps save some time. So right now I'm just attaching the joint onto the front of the recycler, the front of the base. And now I'm going to go ahead and stretch that out and shape it upward so it's going up the way that a joint naturally would. And I'm going to cut it off and finish the shape of it. I personally like female joints, so I'm going to use the paddle to kind of push it down a teeny little bit and give it the aesthetic that a female would. But right now I'm just finalizing the angle of it with the tweezers, making sure that it's perfectly on axis. So now I'm being very careful just to heat up the very tip of it and you can't see, but I'm pushing just the very tip. You can see it kind of right there that I pushed it, and it looks a little more flat at the tip instead of pointed like a male joint would. So now that I've got that sealed, I use my annealing flame to heat it all up again, and you can see I'm almost done with the shaping of this piece. So now I'm going to bridge the joint because I don't want someone to accidentally, pick it up or have that get caught on something and then it breaks. So I'm trying to reinforce it any way I can, and I'm putting a little bit of glass in between the joint and the uptake so it reinforces it and gives it extra durability. Of course, I'm using that mini torch to get extra care in there and get it melted in to make sure it's all finalized. There's really no way that I'd be able to achieve those angles as easily on the main torch. The mini torch really allows for access to areas that almost would be impossible to achieve. So it's a very, very helpful tool. I used to not work with it, but when I began working with it, it changed the game. So right now, what I'm doing is I'm going back, heating it all up nice and evenly, making sure that you see the bridge and how it's reinforced there. And what I'm about to do is put that in the kiln, let that heat up nice and evenly, because I'm going to begin working on the top and bottom spinning axis as well as the bridge that holds it together. So right now I'm just heating up this portion. I think it's some green stardust, probably one of my favorite colors. And what I'm going to do is just really simple, is heat it up and then flatten it so it just comes to a nice, simple, flat base. And you're just going to create a little disc shape. So I heated it up and I'm putting it in between my marvers, as you can see, to make sure that both of the walls stay completely even. So once that's done, I'm using it, I use the bottom marver to make sure that it's nice and square, and or round actually, but perfectly on axis. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to heat up the very center of it, and I use a bowl push. You can use a reamer or anything, but I use this tool to push straight into the center of it, and that creates a tiny little round divot where that pointed part of the recycler, or those pointed axis, they fit perfectly in that little divot and they spin. And so that's really the secret of it all. So what I'm doing right here is that step again. I'm just making the bottom axis as well as the top one, and then I'll end up bridging those together. So right now, when you heat up the glass, it's all about rotation and consistency. You don't have to rotate fast, you don't have to rotate slow. It just needs to be nice and consistent, nice and machine-like, without any hesitation. And that's really the hardest part. I mean, I remember my first time I was hesitating in rotation as well, but it's all about practice. So right now I'm heating it up and just pushing the divot in again. I like to heat it up 2 times and make sure the divot's pushed in nice and well. And as you can see right there, there's clearly 2 little pockets there where those pointed notches will fit in nice and evenly. So right now what I'm doing is I'm estimating the distance that they need to be. I'm going to estimate how large I need to make the bridge. You can see that's exactly where the pockets are going to be reinforced. So the pointed part is going to go in one of the little divots, and then another pointed part's going to go in the other divot, and I need to bridge those together. But what I did there is estimated the distance of the bridge, which makes it a little bit easier than just guessing. And that's one of the trickiest parts about making these kinetic recyclers, is getting those bridges to the exact right proportion. It's a very crucial step because you want it to look nice and even, but if it doesn't, you just kind of have to do some readjustments, which is actually what I had to do in this video. So what I'm doing right there is I'm just pulling off the bottom part of the spinner to make sure that the top and bottom come to a nice pointed axis. And I actually put that thing on top of the kiln, so I'll be able to grab it with my hand or with my glove and then use it later on without it being extremely hot. And since it's so small and delicate, it won't crack because it's not very thick. So right now I use some clear because I personally like the bridges to be transparent, and I'm going to attach that to the bottom or the top axis. It doesn't particularly matter, but one of the spinning axes is what I attach that to. And I'm going to go ahead and melt that so it will be able to fit around the spinning vessel, whether it's whatever you guys sculpt, or whether it's a particular recycler, you want to make sure that the bridge can fit around it. And I went over there because I have inches marked on my concrete board, and I was measuring the amount of inches that I need to make the next bend so that it will be able to fit it properly. So that's why it's good to premeditate exactly the measurements that you'll need, so it just helps you get your job done quicker and easier. So right now I'm just finalizing the bends and making sure that everything's going to be perfectly on axis. And when you do your bends, you want to make sure to check, rotate when it's cooling down to check all the angle of the bend so it's not getting off axis on each bend that you make. And right now what I'm doing is I'm just cutting off part of the bridge that's going to seal the top axis to it. And we can go ahead and heat it up and seal that on there. And it needs to be perfectly even between both handles, so that's one of the trickiest parts. That's why I'm pulling off a little bit more glass, because right before I sealed it there, I saw that it was a little bit too long. So now what I'm going to go ahead and do is make sure that there's exactly the right amount, and it's okay to readjust it. It's always better to have more glass on than less, because it's harder to add the glass on after you've pulled it off already. So right now that I've pulled off enough and I saw that it has the right angle and has enough glass, you can see that it's even between both handles. The only thing that rotates is just the bridge. Now what I'm going to do is go ahead and take the recycler and attempt to stick that in between those two spinning axis points there. So right now you can see that I have a little bit of extra room, and what I'm going to do is make an adjustment. Typically I would have measured this properly and it wouldn't have had that extra space, but it's no big deal, because you can either make a simple Maria, which is just a nice disc pushed together with the glass rod, or you can heat it up in like a freestyle way, sort of like what I'm doing right here, and just heating it up and letting it drip together while I gently push. So the drips are nice and even, they're on axis, and it doesn't look too wonky, but the purpose is getting done, which is that the two spinning points are getting gently closer together, which is exactly what needs to happen in order to fit the recycler. So what I'm doing right now is attempting to see if the recycler will fit in between those 2 points, and it seems that it's almost going to be able to. And what I need to do after I can see that it fits is I'll be heating up one of the corners, and one of those corners I need to bend outward so that way I can fit the recycler in there, and then I'll be able to squeeze it back in. So right now I'm just going in and I'm heating up that point that I melted in a little bit more, just so I can give it some very fine adjustments. It's all about precise measurements to make these spinners happen. So I'm making sure that it's just the right size, and then it's going to fit just fine. Right now I'm going in and heating up the corner, and I'm bending it outward slightly so there's more open space to allow the vessel inside there. And what I'll be able to do is bend that right back nice and easily. So what I did is I cut off the base, or one of the handles, just so I can have a simple point to grab without having a long handle at the end. And now this recycler is not extremely hot because it's been outside, and I can grab it with my hand. And what I do is I'm being very careful not to touch the glass that's hot, and I'm putting the recycler in between those 2 axis points after I heated up that corner, and then I use that marver to push the corner back so it can fit, and it would grab those 2 axis points. And right now I just use the tweezers to go back in and make sure that it's evenly adjusted. And now you can see it spins just fine. And that is how you would make a spinning recycler pendant. Now after this you make the loop and it's a bendy. Thank you all so much for checking that out and tuning in. I hope you learned something, and make sure to subscribe.